Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. It's an absolute pleasure to be here today again for the Global Innovation Forum. My name is Melanie Chevalier. I'm the founder of Creative Culture, and I'm delighted to be here today with Ere Santos, who is senior animator at Sony Pictures. Today, we'll be looking at how to manage creativity and what lessons we can take from Hollywood animation. So, how to manage creativity, innovation, expectations in a very demanding industry that is entertainment. And we'll also see how animation and innovation add value to Hollywood big productions. Hi, good morning, Ari. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Very good, very good. Thank you.
Have you
I
had your
guess I thought
coffee?
we might kick off this session with you giving us a bit of an intro on yourself, your job, what it looks like day to day to be an animator with Sony, and a bit more information if you don't mind.
For sure, absolutely. Yeah, so I'm Ari Santos, as you said. I'm currently a senior animator at Sony. I've been working in the industry for just over like 5.5 years now. Um, yeah, I started out my career actually working as an intern at Pixar, and then that kind of led to working at Sony on Hotel Transylvania 3. After which I went briefly back to Pixar to work on a short film called Loop. Then after that, I moved to London. I started working and bouncing around a lot. I worked on a movie called The One and Only Ivan at NPC. Then I moved over to Double Negative, where I worked on Ron's Gone Wrong. And then finally, I worked at a company called Jellyfish on a movie called Spirit Untamed. And I recently just moved back to Vancouver, Canada, where I'm working on the Spider-Verse sequel.
Very good, very good. Yes, we call this Hollywood, but effectively you're based in Canada, right? And you
Hollywood
work
North.
for big super
Exactly.
productions that are part of the Hollywood scene, right? Good, good. So, I guess just as a quick note for those who haven't seen them yet, we have Chris, who is from Live Illustration, who will be literally taking some insights from our chat today and putting them as a live illustration on the screen, which will be shared after a session. And if you don't mind, Ari, you shared some show reels with us ahead of our
Yeah,
session, and I thought it'd be a good way to kick off the session to see the first one.
for sure.
Careful! When you trust yourself, your horse will too. He'll know exactly what you're thinking. Then you'll be joined up.
Joined Up, that's my favorite trail song. When
Oh, stop talking. We're in the middle of an interview and all you guys think you're in NASA. You're just thinking, oh, yeah, here we go. Yeah, all right, well, good to go. Yeah, rolling. Yeah, action. I call action. I'm the director. And Graham, action.
100 million units sold! Woo, yeah! Well, we made 100 million new friends, all helping kids connect, meet each other, interact.
And all through their B-bots. Making friends face to face? So last 3 millennia.
That's not
Some
what...
kids check in with their bots 100 times a day, plus 11 times overnight.
Are these your drawings?
What? No,
Oh,
no.
good.
Oh, right. You own that Holiday Inn down by the airport.
No, it is I, Abraham Van Helsing. She's free.
Step on over that one. Yeah, you can just... Sorry about the mess. I bring my work home with me. There is more, of course. We eat there, and the sleeping is upstairs.
Very nice, very nice. So I don't want to give too much away because we'll see a couple more short show reels a bit later in our conversation. But for those who are not aware of the technical process, what is your role? What does being an animator mean, and how do you put all of these things together?
Absolutely. So, in general, as an animator, what I do is that it's essentially we're the actors of the animation world. When we get a scene that we're going to assign the scene, and the director tells us what the motivation of the scene is, where the character's coming from, where the character's going, what needs to happen in the scene, and then we kind of take all that information, go to our desks, and start animating the characters. And when I say animating, it's essentially we're kind of like puppeteers, where someone else, they make the model, they make the puppet, and someone else puts the strings on the puppet, and then they give it to us, the animators, and then we go ahead and we move the character and make it feel all like it's dancing and swinging it around. So essentially, it's just us going around and puppeteering these characters, making them feel like alive and making them not feel like digital entities, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. You bring humanity to them, right? You
Yes.
make them have
Yeah.
absolute human features. Lovely.
We
And
give
so
them-
what does innovation mean in your field, sorry?
Yeah, no, I think that in general, animation has been done the same way for a long time, especially in Western animation. We'll talk about that later on. But very often, I find a lot of audiences are getting a little bit tired of just seeing the same thing over and over again. There's nothing wrong with princesses, nothing wrong with musicals, but we've kind of seen that over and over and over and over and over the past 100 years. So what's great about innovation in animation recently is that there's a lot more content that's coming out that's kind of pushing the boundaries of like what's possible in animation, what we've seen before, and kind of changing it all and saying like we're going to do something completely different, especially in 3D animation. So innovation kind of looks like just the next evolution of animation, next evolution of what can be done visually, what can be done conceptually. And I think that's really great because we're now just starting to tap into the potential of animation, where it's a medium that you can do anything. So why aren't we doing everything, you know? So I think that's what we're just now seeing.
Brilliant. And I guess from what you were saying in our previous chats, it's not only what technology enables you to do, but it's also what people want to see, right?
Exactly. And I think it's really important to kind of think about what are you trying to say? And we talk about this a lot, but what are you trying to say as an animator? What are you trying to say as an artist and as a filmmaker? And why are you using animation to say it this way? You know, and I think that's what's really, really important, is to kind of take that concept and just kind of see how I can extrapolate from there, if that makes sense.
And what are the main challenges you've faced so far then? Because as far as I understand it, it's an industry where a lot of the same has been reproduced over the years, and there is a movement for change. What are the challenges you face in that process?
I think the challenge that anybody would face when you're trying to say something different in a world, in a very, very established environment, it's what do I have to say? Why is my voice different from the past 100 years of voices, you know? And I think that's the main point, is that all the 100 years of voices is if people are trying to sound like a specific artist, trying to sound like a specific area. But now there's a lot of people saying, actually, no, I think the way that I see the world, I think the way that I view things is different. And I think that you should listen to me. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing a lot now in different spaces in animation.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I'm picking back up on what you mentioned earlier on. So looking into the future and the differences between the West and the East in terms of animation, what are the things you're seeing, and what do you think it means for the future of animation?
Yeah, I feel, very honestly, I feel like the Western animation is starting to take a lot of cues from the Eastern animation, because Eastern animation for decades has been getting pushed and pushed and pushed, and you see a lot of it in a lot of the movies, a lot of the TV that is coming out of the East. There's just a lot more animation just is being used as an art form as opposed to a genre, you know, because a lot in the West, the people consider animation a genre, which it really isn't. It's just a medium. And you see a lot of people trying to say like, well, it's for kids and it's for this, and like you're not really recognizing the potential of animation. But if you look a lot of Eastern animation with anime and different Japanese specifically animated movies, you're going to see that there's a lot more like they notice animation can be used for any purpose, you know, and they're telling all sorts of different stories, all sorts of different stories using this art form that can do anything, you know. And I think that Western animation is just now starting to move into that space of, wait, we can do things that are not just for kids. Like we can do, you know, all sorts of different things. And when I say not just for kids, that doesn't mean that it's going to be raunchy and sexualized and everything like that. But it's just talking about mature stories, talking about mature themes, and not holding back any punches because of any perspective. So I think that's a great situation that's happening right now in the West.
Do you think it's about taking more risks and opening to new audiences?
Yeah, and I think that there's a stigma that's kind of being fought right now. Like the biggest risk is if we make this new piece of content, who's going to watch it? Who's going to be interested in seeing something like that? And I think that because there's this ingrained concept of animations for kids. So a lot of Western audiences aren't going to kind of automatically realize, wait a second, this thing isn't necessarily for kids. And how am I going to, how are we going to kind of push past that? How are we going to market that differently and all that kind of stuff? So I think that it's a lot of trying to push Western animation is just about fighting stigma, and I think that's a huge hurdle that we're about to overcome.
Yeah, of course. And so how do you think the East will influence the West in that sense? You might not have the answer, but what do you feel is the future of animation? What is innovation? What is next?
Yeah, that you're right. I have no clue. And I think that's what's so exciting about this space, because it's like, well, I can't really see what's in the future, but let's keep going, And I feel what's great is that the East is just doing what they're doing, and it's great, and they're just going to continue doing what they're doing, and they're going to continue growing their thing. And I feel like a lot of change is happening over here, where it's kind of like, okay, well, we're looking over there, but they're also looking at different places to kind of see what other parts of the world we can tell different stories. And there's a lot of what's really, really exciting for me in particular is starting to see a lot of really cool stories coming out of my birthplace of Africa, and just kind of seeing stories from Nigeria, stories from South Africa, stories from Ghana, all these different places. And that to me is like, we've never seen animation really come out of those places. So to me, it's to be able to see high quality animation coming out is like, whoa, we're just starting to scratch the surface of all this new storytelling. And that to me is exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. Super exciting. I agree. So our session is called Managing Creativity, and I know it's a topic you're very fond of. And as I mentioned in my introduction, it is a very challenging environment, no doubt. One that is very tight in terms of deadlines, number of stakeholders, no doubt, that you have to get approval from, and the impact that, your innovation or your creativity has on the overall character or the feature film itself. So tell us a bit more about that and how you manage creativity in that environment on a day-to-day basis.
I think it's really, really important to, at least for me, two things. First of all, you need to know yourself. And second of all, you need to continue to find your voice. I think that it's really hard to kind of progress and innovate and tell unique stories in animation, in any art form, in my opinion, until you found your voice, And by knowing yourself, you also know what your limits are. You know what your creative limits are. You know what your physical limits are. You know what your emotional, mental, all these different things. And that's really important for managing things like burnout. And that's really important for managing things like expectations and client requests. And when someone asks you, a big question in any art is, oh, how long is that going to take you? And it's really important that you kind of know yourself and know your capabilities and kind of have realistic expectations. And I think that a lot of times people don't ask themselves what we should do as artists. We should just ask ourselves what we can do as artists. I think that without asking ourselves what we should do, that's what leads to a lot of burnout. That's what leads to a lot of, I'm just going to do what I can do and constantly do what I can do. When I get to my limit, I'll just burn out and then I'll rest and then I'll come back and continue working. But, we can't really create if we are not taking care of ourselves and we're not taking care of our minds and our hearts and all these different things. And I think that the practical practical process of creating art to me is just as important as taking care of yourself and taking care of how you're managing the thing that's actually creating that creativity, if that makes sense. So I think it comes hand in hand, but it's just taking care of yourself in order to create. effective art.
Hmm. Yeah, because creativity on a schedule is not nearly impossible, but it's extremely challenging, right?
It is, and I think that I was actually just having a conversation with some friends recently where we were asking ourselves, are we actually artists? I don't really feel like an artist, because it kind of feels like when you're creating art that's commercial, it kind of has this feeling of, well, this isn't really art. This is just me, creating something for a specific purpose that's getting paid, and it's going to get all these iterations, and it doesn't really feel like it's just coming from your heart, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that, but I think that what we do is art. I think what we do is having this ability to artistically problem solve, because this is essentially a problem solving job. You're presented with a scene, you're presented with a problem, and the director is like, I don't know what this is supposed to look like. Show me what it's supposed to look like, and you have to solve that problem, and you have to kind of figure out, okay, well, what is this mean, and like how is this character going to move, and how's this character going to feel, and what feeling am I trying to evoke to the audience with the way the character is going to move.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And more, before we move on to looking at the two short showreels that you've shared with us as well, on a more personal note, I understand you're self-taught
Yes.
and you started as an actor. What would you tell all these young people that may be watching you and that might not feel that, they will be able to aspire to such a great and creative role as yours if they haven't maybe had the opportunity to study in that area? What's your message to them?
Don't stop. Don't stop. I would say that the best piece of advice that I ever got was, if you want to get it, and this works for any art form in my opinion, if you want to go into animation, I'll give you one piece of advice: don't do it. But if when I said don't do it, you thought, oh, really? Maybe I shouldn't do it, then you probably shouldn't be doing it. But if you thought, no, you know what? I don't care what you say, I'm going to do that anyway. If you're not going to help me, I'll find someone else to help me. That's when you know that that's what you're supposed to be doing. I think it's there's too much sacrifice, there's too much time, it's not an easy thing to get into. So when you have the opportunity to not do that, I would take it. But if you like, this is an art form you have to really love, and you have to really breathe, you have to think about it all the time, and like, if you want to grow in it, you need to really, really throw yourself into it. I think that's super important especially when you're starting out. You really kind of have to, in a sense, you kind of have to be toxic about it. You kind of have to just live, eat, and breathe, this art every single day, and that's going to really, really help you move forward. And also reach out to people and see how you can learn from them as much as possible.
Yeah, passion and resilience. Is that right?
Absolutely. Thanks for making me sound a lot smarter.
Let's have a look at the two other showreels, and I think you'll probably bring it a bit more to life for people and see your role and your involvement in making these characters come to life.
Sure.
Careful! When you trust yourself, your horse will too. He'll know exactly what you're thinking. Then you'll be joined up.
Joined up? That's my favorite trail song!
Wait, are these drawings?
What? No, no.
Good.
Yeah. So essentially, thank you. Like me being silly in my apartment, I love it. It's definitely. Yeah. No, I think it's essentially what we do is, this is not the process for everybody, but a lot of animators, what they do is that they often film themselves for reference, and then they show the director their acting, and they kind of show them, okay, well, this is what I was thinking for the scene. This is how the character is going to move and think and all that kind of stuff. And once they've done that, then and the director kind of gives her notes on, okay, I think I like this performance, I like that performance, et cetera, et cetera. Then you can take that and you can start using that as reference to animate your scene. So we're not copying the movement. What we're doing is just taking the ideas from the movement. We're taking the problems that we solved through the video reference, and we're just kind of putting it onto the character. So for instance, I am not a 12-year-old girl, so obviously I just kind of have to act as much as I can to make it feel um, as accurate as possible. So as I was filming the reference, I'm trying to find out how I'm going to get the characters to feel when they're on screen together, and how I'm going to make the characters feel, like they're alive, and make them feel like they're thinking and breathing and reacting to what's happening in the scene. And you kind of have to run it through like your animation translation filter and come out the other end with like, okay, this is now the animation. This is now what I've taken the reference that I filmed. I got the acting choices and I put it onto this character, and I made it feel like that character. Because you don't want a character to feel like you. You want the character to feel like the character. You want the character to feel like it's its own living, breathing, thinking entity. If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like a creative brief, right? And you're sort of informing art direction and what you have in mind and how the character will behave and be personified, right?
Absolutely.
I have a question from the audience, which is actually really interesting. That was my next question, so it's brilliant. It comes from Emily Chang, who is asking, how do you influence the storylines that you work on?
So in animation, these movies are made by hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people, and what's great is that you usually have a director at the top, and or depending on if you don't consider hierarchical structures, a director who's working with you, and it's their vision, it's their movie, and it's your job as an artist, no matter what your department, no matter what your role is, it's your job to bring the director's vision to life. So you can influence the storyline by doing in your own little way, by kind of talking about how you're going into your one scene and kind of making that scene feel a certain way, and making that scene feel a little bit like you, or a little bit like whatever. But at the end of the day, all those hundreds and hundreds of people, their whole purpose is to make the director's vision come to life, and there are times where if you feel very strongly about a specific story point, you can speak up, and there's channels to do that through in a lot of people, in a lot of ways. I think it's really important to kind of go through the right channels and make sure that you are speaking up in the right ways. And sometimes if you feel really passionate about something, chances are when you release the film, there's going to be millions of people that feel as passionately. So it's really, really important. If you feel passionate about something, you need to speak up, and you need to make sure that you are helping the director, again, bring the best version of their idea to life.
And speaking of passion, you are an active advocate of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yeah.
How does that influence your work? And do you have examples of projects that you worked on where that really truly inspired you?
Yeah. So I think that for me, it's all about perspective. It's all about perspective and storytelling. And I think, going back to what we said at the beginning, it's really, really important to find your voice as an artist. And once you found your voice, that's essentially finding a perspective, finding what you value, finding what makes how you see the world, and how the world has shaped you. You take all that information, and then you go and you tell a unique story. I find that a lot of the stories have kind of felt very similar because they've kind of come from very similar perspectives and very similar backgrounds. But a lot of the stories that are coming out now are very different because they're coming from people who maybe didn't grow up in a Western context. And I think it's really, really important to kind of go out and seek those stories, go out and seek those perspectives, because that what that does is that it enriches your product, it enriches your audience. And then what's inevitably going to happen is that you're going to have a lot of people, millions of people that are going to see these projects, and they're going to have all these little kids, and sometimes a lot of adults that'll kind of see these projects and think to themselves, I see myself and I see my perspective, I see my voice, and that's going to inspire them to tell different stories in their own ways, in their own fields. And that's why, to me, it's important, because you're helping broaden the perspective and empathy of people in the world. You know, I think that is just, to me, is the coolest thing ever.
Absolutely. And I guess to loop the loop in this case, we were discussing how innovation for the sake of innovation is moot, right?
Mhm.
And you brought up the fact that it has to be purposeful, it has to anchor itself in society and in culture. I guess what's your role in this? How do you play that role as an animator?
I ask myself that every day. I'm like, what am I doing? You know, but I think that's the thing. It just kind of continuing the conversation of just furthering perspective. Like, it's my responsibility as an artist, as an animator, to share my perspective, to show the world how I see the world, because hopefully someone's going to latch onto that. Hopefully someone's going to see themselves differently. And someone's going to see, okay, how can, if this person is seeing the world this way, that means I must also be able to see the world in a different way, and kind of help them kind of grow from that. But I think something that is a big is a lot of importance to me is that innovation requires innovation, you know, and you needed to be able to create the computer first before you can create the internet, and before you can create after you create the internet, you can create these websites. When you create these websites, you can create these, you know, so you need to be able to share your perspective, you need to share your ideas in order for the next thing to be able to get unlocked and be able to share their ideas in order for the next thing, you know. So that to me is all so exciting. Just the fact that we are constantly moving forward in society, and what we need to be able to share our perspectives in order to be able to be as effective as possible.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
We have another audience question from Ben Kubler, who asks, what opportunities does animation provide as opposed to live action?
Absolutely. I think that it's a huge, like, anything is any idea you can have is possible. And I think that live action, you're limited by, very often, if you're going to see something, if it doesn't feel right, you're going to feel like, oh, that's too.
It looks like your video devices are offline.
Sorry.
You might want to check
Hey,
that
Google,
they're on and connect.
Stop. Okay. Sorry.
The beauty of technology.
I know, right? Innovation, that's the whole. If you see live action and see something that doesn't seems a bit too fantastical, you're going to kind of feel like, well, this is a bit weird, or something feels a bit off. But with animation, we have the ability to do crazy things and just kind of give the world like a talking alligator, and then that just makes sense, and we just move on with it, you know. And we can create, we're not bound by the laws of reality, we're not bound by the laws of physics and all these kind of things. Because in animation, we're not trying to create things that feel real, we're trying to create things that feel believable. And I think that's a huge distinction that's really, really important to kind of make, is that it's not about creating the most realistic content, it's about creating the most believable and empathetic content.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that fits in very well with what you were saying about anchoring yourself in society and culture.
Yeah.
We are running out of time, sadly, Eri. So I guess, firstly, thank you so much. It was really interesting to speak to you today. And I guess, would you be able to share a tip or two for people watching us, specifically on the area of managing creativity?
Yeah, honestly, it's maybe funny, but sleep. I think that sleep is the most important thing, because it helps refresh yourself. It helps bring you back to a nice base level. And in order to create, in order to innovate, in order to inspire and think and all these things, you need to have a brain, obviously, that's working. And your brain can't work as effectively as it can if you're not resting yourself. If you're not allowing yourself to kind of be refreshed. And that whole concept of rest kind of goes beyond that, not just sleeping, but it's asking yourself, am I close to a burnout? If I'm close to a burnout, don't wait till burnout before you take a rest. That's not the point. You need to step back. You need to make sure that you are taking care of yourself. If you cannot care for yourself, how are you going to be able to spread your message and spread your your viewpoints as effectively, So I think that's important. The number one rule for innovation, in my opinion, is sleep. Make sure you get enough sleep.
Sounds like a very wise advice. Thank you so much, Harry. It was
Absolutely.
lovely once again. And look forward to seeing our illustration.
Absolutely. Thank you.